Hello, this is the podcast episode with April Dunford. If you don't speak Dutch, just skip this Dutch introduction of about 30 seconds. Hallo en welkom bij aflevering 226 van de N-Holding Show. Waar je leert van ondernemers en ondernemende mensen die bijzondere resultaten bereiken, hoe ze hier gekomen zijn, wat ze doen, de strategie en hoe ze klanten krijgen. Mijn naam is N-Holding en ik deel mijn opgedane kennis, ervaringen en expertise met jou. Ik coach ondernemers die kennis leveren aan bedrijven, om beslissingen te nemen die in eigen belang zijn, zodat ze sneller bereiken wat ze willen, terwijl ze meer vrijheid voor zichzelf creëren. Vandaag het gesprek met April Dunford. April is a consultant and author who helps companies make complicated products easy for customers to understand and love. She is a globally recognized expert in positioning, having launched 16 products across her 25-year career as Vice President Marketing at a series of successful startups. She is the author of the best-selling book, Obviously Awesome, How to Nail Product Positioning so Customers Get It, Buy It, Love It. Just one tweet got me to learn more about positioning and April Dunford. One tweet by Rand Fishkin made me buy this book and read it right away. Obviously Awesome is a great book and easy to read, so I read it in 2 days and started applying the basic steps with one of my clients that really needed a better positioning of their product. The energy from that 30 minutes with that client was great and got them to interview their target client again with the tips from April. You're about to listen to a great conversation and learn more about April and how she got into the world of positioning and why she is the best in this niche now. An important topic for most entrepreneurs if you want to attract better clients. You have a problem with positioning of your product when your current customers love you, but the new customers can't figure out what you're selling. And it's good to know that you can always reposition a product. Enjoy the insights with April. Let's get started.
Welkom in de N-Holding Show. De podcast waarin je leert over de beslissingen om te groeien als ondernemer met je bedrijf. Luister naar de persoonlijke verhalen van succesvolle ondernemers en ondernemende mensen. Dan nu, jouw business coach, N-Holding.
So, I'm very glad that I'm following Rand Fishkin for a while now on Twitter and everywhere, because he announced at some point a book from a person that I didn't know before, but he was so enthusiastically on Twitter about this book that I had to buy it right away. So I did, and I learned about positioning, and I learned about the writer, April Dunford. Welcome, April.
Hey, it's great to be here. I need to start paying Rand Fishkin some royalties or something.
That's
Thanks,
what I
Rand.
thought. I thought the only thing that could happen from this, when I just bought this from this one tweet, just right away I bought the book. I'm probably not the only one, so I guess there's a lot of people that bought the book just from this one tweet.
There is. He's got a really massive following on Twitter. So it's funny, you can look at your book sales. It's not totally accurate, but you can kind of see your book sales when people are talking about you online. And normally, you look at it and you say, I don't know if that really made a difference or not. But yeah, Rand recommending your book makes a difference. I can say that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I don't. He has a massive following, but I think the biggest part me that makes a difference is I trust him. I trust him completely. So when he says something, it's really
He's
good.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
Yeah.
For me, that was also eye-opening, and that if you have people that trust you and that endorse you, that endorse your book or your work, that is really important for new people to get to know you.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I've been reading your book, and actually I've also used it at a session with a client of mine already, but not the complete steps that you follow in the book, but part of it to make their positioning clear again, because for me it was all over the place and they thought it was clear, but after that session it was really clear. So it was really helpful for me. And positioning, I think I wrote it, I think post or in a tweet, is the whole marketing starts with the right position of your product or your business, right?
Mm-hmm. It's this kind of foundational concept, right? That if you think about everything we do in marketing and sales, like think about you're making a marketing campaign. You want to run some online ads, or you want to create some content, or you want to do an email campaign, or even if you're thinking about things you do from a sales perspective. I have salespeople and I want them to call some people to drum up some business. Like there's a fundamental set of inputs into any of those things. Like, so if you came to me and said, hey, April, you're my head of marketing and, let's do some advertising. I'd say, well, okay, fine. I need some information from you. I need to know, who's your target market? So who are the customers you're actually trying to go get? And how is your product different and better than anything else those people might choose? And all of those things flow from your positioning. So if you're not really clear on your key differentiators, if you're not really clear on even the competitive alternatives that your customers compare you to, then you're going to have a hard time answering those questions. Or you might answer those questions and your answers might be bad. And if those answers are bad, then it means the inputs to your marketing is bad, and that means the outputs are bad. And so you kind of got to get the positioning clear first before you can invest in any marketing or sales tactic and feel good that it's actually going to work.
The thing I see when I look at my clients and I look at small business in particular, is that I would say 99%, or maybe that's a bit too much, but 95% of them don't have the positioning very clear. They are not very clear of what makes their product different than from the businesses around, products around. Do you see that same thing?
Yeah. Yeah, like it's actually totally common and across all businesses that they're not super clear on it. And there's a few reasons for that. Like, so one thing is that often inside the company, we think about our competitors in a different way than our customers do. And so I see this a lot. Like, I work as a positioning consultant and I work mainly with small tech companies. And so it's in a lot of startups, you'll go out and you'll say, hey, so who's your competition? And they'll say, oh, we got a lot of competition, and they'll list down like 5 or 6 little companies out in Silicon Valley that nobody's ever heard of. And they'll say, oh yeah, this is our competition. And I'll say, okay, so what makes you different and better than that? And they'll say, well, their products are really complicated to use, and our big differentiator is ease of use. Like, it takes 12 clicks to do something in theirs, and in ours it only takes 2. So we're the easy to use people. But then you go and you talk to their customers and you say, hey, like, if these folks didn't exist, what would you do? And the customer will say things like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'd just use a spreadsheet, or maybe I would hire an intern. And if your real competition is a spreadsheet or an intern, you are literally never going to win on ease of use. Like, that's the reason people pick those things. They're super easy to use. Like, so you got to have some value versus the intern, other than versus other software products, if that's the comparison that your customers are doing. So that's the first thing.
So because that's weird, right? Because you think of, like me, I think of my competition are other business coaches. And right. And if you ask the client, they probably said something completely different. They say, then I would talk to another business owner, just have some conversation with. I just meet up with somebody.
Right.
And but why is it that if you build a product or created or have a product, that you have no correct idea of what the competition is?
Well, I think we naturally. It's natural for us to kind of look at it from our perspective instead of the customer's perspective. So, in startups, what you'll get is, we're building a product and we're building a software product. So we'll look at what other software products out there exist that look kind of like ours and say, oh, we can make something better than that. and then we'll build it and it's better than that. And I think it works the same way for consultants. You say, I'm a marketing consultant, and you'll look at all the other marketing consultants and say, oh, I could do better than that. I'm different in these ways, and this is what I do. And so, and you'll talk that, and you'll think that way. And I think it's natural for us to do that. But customers, on the other hand, are often the best markets are where the customer doesn't know anything about any good solutions. They're doing things with manual processes, or they're talking to their buddy and they're Googling things, and so your real competition might look nothing like your actual offering, which is fine. And a lot of times that it's an indication that the market's wide open. There's lots of opportunities. There's lots of space to make money. But it's natural for us to compare things that we think look just like us. But we're, our opinion kind of doesn't matter. Like the only opinion that matters is what do customers look at? What are they doing today? And what are they going to have to stop doing in order to use your offering? And that's actually your real competition, is that. It's really a more, I find it helpful to think about alternative ways of solving the problem rather than competition. So when you think competition, you automatically think, well, who else is just like me, doing a thing just like me? But from a customer's perspective, there are lots of other alternative ways of solving the problem that aren't technically your quote unquote competitors.
Yes, I understand you now. That's good. And so let's say you are a positioning consultant. Who is the other product or thing that the customer is using now to do their positioning?
Yeah, so my competition is do nothing. That's my competition.
But that's also very difficult.
Oh, it's the worst. So the do nothing is the worst competition. Do nothing means that your target buyers do not know they have a problem. Therefore, they are not seeking to solve it. So do nothing is often the worst competitor. It also means that often that your market's just not very mature. So because people don't understand they have a problem, they're not trying to solve it. And so what it means, interestingly, is your job is to not sell, at the beginning anyways, is to not sell your offering. Your job is to actually sell the problem. So if you look at the stuff I do to drum up business, I speak at a lot of conferences, and if you see me speak at a conference, the first half of my talk is all about, hey, you think you know what positioning is, but you actually have no clue. And oh, by the way, you're probably doing a crummy job of it. and so what has to happen in my talks is the people in the audience need to look at it, and a light bulb needs to go on where they go, oh man, I got that problem. I didn't know I had that problem, but I got it. And then they talk to me, and then I have to convince them that I have a decent solution for it. So it's kind of terrible in a way, and it requires that you have a way of getting your clients to this kind of aha moment where they go, oh, dang it. I didn't know I had that problem, and now I know I got it. So for me, that's like speaking at conferences. I have this book out now, and then I get a lot of business from personal referrals where I've managed to get the client to the light bulb moment. They've worked with me, and then they're out talking to their friends, and their friend says, oh, I've got all these problems in my business, and this is what it looks like. And their friend says, oh, I had that, and it turned out I had this positioning thing, and you should talk to this gal.
Because the speaking thing, that is kind of a point for me as well. Because I understand it is important that you teach the world about the issues that they have that they don't know. But also, at some point, it looks like you're in the speaking business and not in the positioning business anymore.
Well, that's kind of hilarious because, I get that a lot where people say, like, you must be like a professional public speaker. And I'm like, no. In fact, the majority of the time that I speak, I don't get paid. Like, I do sometimes, but because it is an incredible time suck. And now that I'm getting a little more famous, I get asked to speak and they pay me. But you know, in the early days of my business, I never got paid to speak, and I was happy to do it because it's lead generation for me. So, you know, and the trick is, though, like as a consultant, you have to make sure you're clear on what your business is. Like there are lots of people on the planet that are just public speakers, and they get paid to speak in public, and they're not trying to sell consulting. Maybe they got a book, but you know, what they're doing is their business. But for the majority of people you see speaking at smaller conferences, they can't really make a living off that because a lot of the smaller conferences don't pay, or if they do pay, they don't pay very much, and you'd have to do a lot of them in a year to make enough money to live. So a lot of the folks you see speaking at conferences are actually in the business of doing something else. So, you know, in my case, I'm talking to people about positioning because I need them to understand it in order for them to want to seek out my services. Other people you see on stage are like me. They're either consultants, so they have something going on, or they work at a company that sells a product or a service, and they're evangelizing whatever it is that their audience needs to understand in order to want to buy their stuff. And it's a weird thing that people assume that everybody speaking at a conference is getting paid and is some kind of pro speaker, but that's actually pretty rare, at least for the conferences that small businesses go to.
Okay, good to know. I don't want to follow that path then.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll stick to the path of getting referrals from the existing clients, because I think that is a lot easier and a lot less work.
Well, you know, I think it's one of these things. Like if you're good at public speaking, it's it's one of the things you might want to explore. But you don't have to do it. Like, you know, there's millions of consultants on the planet that don't do public speaking. For me, I'm somewhat known as a speaker already, and it's partly because I've always been in marketing. So, you know, I've always been repping a product or doing something. And so I've been on stage a lot across my career. And then I've had training and, you know, so I'm an okay public speaker. I'm fairly good at it. So it's one of the things that I can do because people will ask me to speak and I get asked to speak. And then I show up and I do a fairly good job. So they ask me to speak some more. So for me, it's a good lead generation thing for me to get up and speak about it. The other thing is that it's an efficient way for me to get in front of, like, I mainly sell to CEOs of tech companies, and a really easy way to get in front of 200 CEOs at tech companies is to go speak at a conference full of CEOs of tech companies. And so it would be a lot easier to do that than to try and buy, you know, I can't buy advertising. People don't even know they have the problem. Like, what would I advertise? Like, so, you know, there's only a few things I could do to efficiently get folks in the door and speaking.
Yeah, I was just talking to a person who on Twitter said, I'm at this stage in my company and I need some help and I don't know what kind of help. And so I called him and we talked a bit, and I said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a business coach. Actually, that's my title. I don't like it, but it seems to be the title that most people understand, at least a bit what you do. And he says, well, I have the same issue. If I look for somebody who can help me with this issue, I'll probably be just searching for a business coach at the moment, even if I don't think that a business coach is the right person to help me, because most of business coaches focus on getting more sales, and that's not what I need. Right. So it is sometimes it's weird to find the right title for what you do, and people are not looking for that title or the solution that you are selling. Yeah. So you have to find the right words that people are using, your clients. Okay, so let's get back in your history, April, because the funny thing that I found is you've been having a degree in system design engineering from the University of Waterloo.
Yeah, that was my thing. Yeah, so I didn't study to be a marketer. No.
How did you get there? Why did you decide to go study design engineering?
Yeah, so this is the thing. So I was always interested in tech, and so I decided to do engineering, and Specifically, I did systems design engineering is this weird thing. It actually has nothing to do with design. It's more like we learned a little bit of systems theory. And to tell you the truth, like, I'm not even sure it was a very well thought out program, to tell you honestly. But what I did know about it was the year I went to do it, it was the hardest program to get into at the hardest school to get into in all of Canada. And I'm kind of competitive. So I was like, if I'm going to go take a techie degree, I'm going to take the best one. And this is the best one. So that's how I ended up in systems design. And then, and so I didn't have a super clear idea of what I wanted to do when I get out. I just thought tech was interesting and to me. And, I got really good marks in math and science. So this is what I'm going to go do. So when I finished, I wasn't super clear on what I wanted to do. I had a couple ideas of things I didn't want to do. Like, I didn't want to compete with for programming jobs with the people in my class, because some of them were totally rock star programmers. And like I said before, I'm kind of competitive. So I was like, I don't think I could beat them in that. So I'm not going to go do that, even though we all had to be pretty good programmers to graduate. But, I just wasn't as good as them. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do that. Plus, I thought, my strengths were a bit more on the communication side. Like, when we did group projects, I was the person that always presented because I wasn't afraid of public speaking. So anyways, I got a job just by luck at a startup. And this was ages ago. Startups weren't even cool. We just called them small tech companies. So I got a job at a small tech company. And how I got in was literally my friend worked there and she put in a word for me and I got in. And the job that I got was a product marketing job. And the requirements for that job was we were selling an SQL database to database administrators. So you had to be kind of techie and you had to know what SQL databases were all about, and you had to be able to write SQL queries, which I could do, but you also had to be not afraid of public speaking, because there was a lot of doing presentations and doing demos at trade shows and going in and doing demos for customers and working with the sales team. So that seemed like a good fit for me. So I got that job. And then a bit later, the company got acquired by a big database company in Silicon Valley. And so that was good. And then my boss left and I just dumb luck. I was kind of in the right place at the right time. And they made me the manager of the whole department. So here I am. I'm 2 years out of my engineering degree, and I literally can't spell marketing. And I'm managing this team of like 20, 30 people. And I got tens of millions of dollars of budget. And I'm winging it. like nothing. And so I decided I was just going to knuckle down and figure it out because, how hard could it be? And so I embarked on what became sort of a 7-8 year crash course in marketing, where I was trying to learn a lot of stuff from books and I was taking a lot of courses, and I had super smart people on my team that I learned a lot from in those first couple of years. And we were pretty successful and as a team. And so I decided, one, this was pretty fun, and two, I was pretty good at it. So then I thought, well, this is my jam. I'm just going to do this. And so after I had done my earn out at that big company, I went to another startup, and this time I was the head of the department, straight in, built a team. We grew really fast. We got acquired. That company got acquired. I stuck around for a couple of years in that. I went out and did another startup as the VP marketing, built a team, grew it. We got acquired, and I did that like 7 times in a row. And that was my jam for like 20 years. That's what I did. Like, I came in, and the company was like $1 million, $2 million revenue, built the team, grew it really fast. And then they just kept getting acquired, which was actually a bit of a bummer, but fun. Yeah, and I did that for the longest time. And then the last 3-4 years, I've transitioned to doing consulting, and I work more or less with the same kind of companies I always worked with as a VP marketing, but I just do this positioning thing. That's the only thing I do now. So yeah, it's been a weird road. Like, it's, if you went back and talked to like me getting into university and had told me this is the way this thing was going to work out, I would have said you were nuts.
Well, I think that's a very common thing. I've been also educated technically telecommunications, and we also did programming, but I loved it. But I also felt scared because when I started programming, it always took me way longer than I wanted to. So I spent so much time behind the computer. I said, this is not what I want to do for full time. And so it was not like you say other people are better than me. I was just afraid of how many hours I would just spend programming because I thought it was so much fun. And I thought, okay, why don't I go around the area where I'm connected at one part to the clients and at the other part with the technical people in the company. So also like a middleman. So I grew from like a project coordinator into sales marketing, and then now I work for myself, like also 13 years or something. So it sounds very similar. And also I'm interested because before you said we got it quiet and it was like a bummer, and also it was fun. So what was the bummer on this situation?
Yeah, like everybody assumes that an acquisition is good. And in my experience, it is and it isn't, right? So and a lot of times it's more isn't than is. So
why? Why?
Yeah, so a handful of things. So one is, you joined the company because you believed in the mission and you liked the people, and and you're part of this executive team, and you're all pulling together to accomplish this bigger goal, which is like, we're going to change the world and do this thing. And generally, after you get acquired, all that goes away. All of it. Like all of it. Like in a lot of cases, your mission changes completely. Your offering often becomes a small thing in amongst some kind of bigger offering that is a completely different mission that you may or may not be excited about. That's one thing. Second thing is you get new bosses, and you might not like those bosses. In fact, you might not. If they had posted a job, you probably weren't going to apply for it because it wasn't even a job you even wanted. So now you got a job that you didn't apply for, you didn't choose to get, but you just have it. And then there's all sorts of other things, like the process of integrating into a new company is often painful. Like the culture is different, the way they do stuff is different. You're generally a smaller company. The company you're getting absorbed by is a big company, so there's a lot of big company process, and everything feels kind of slow. And there's, like I worked for a little startup, and we got acquired by a big company in the Valley called Siebel. And the CEO was this guy, Tom Siebel, who at this point is like a billionaire, and he flies around in a helicopter, drives a really fancy sports car and all that stuff, right? So we're 8,000 people, the whole company. And so our little company, which was like 150 people or something, we get acquired. So we're now part of that. I became the head of marketing for a division, like a pretty big division. We did 800 million in my division. So it was kind of a nice, fancy job. But, the first thing that struck me after the acquisition was how painful really simple things, like things that I would have done at the startup that were really simple, were super painful at this company. So we were going to do a trade show. And part of the deal with going to the trade show was we would bring some print collateral, like some brochures. So I go to my boss and I say, hey, I got to get some brochures. What's our process here to order them? And they said, oh, we got this system, and you put your request in this system, whatever. And I said, look, this trade show is like 3 months away. When should I do that? And he says, oh, you should do it now, because, sometimes it takes 3 months to get through the system, whatever. And I'm like, whew, okay. So I put the thing in the system, and when you hit like submit, it builds this thing, and it tells you how many, where your thing is in the process of getting approvals. And there were 8 levels of approval. And I was ordering a $30 box of brochures. And I was like, why does this take 8 levels of approvals? This is comical. And when I looked at the 8 levels of approvals, the last level of approval was Tom Siebel. So I went back to my boss and I said, my dude, are you telling me that the billionaire has to approve my $30 box of brochures? And he goes, yeah, it's kind of stupid, but that's just sort of the way it works. And I said, so what is the likelihood I'm going to get this before the trade show comes? And he says, pretty much 0. Yeah, you know. And so I went to the trade show with no brochures. And literally 9 months later, this box of brochures showed up. And all the people that had been at Siebel for a long time were all making fun of me. They're like, oh, that's a rookie move, man. You should have ordered like 200 brochures and kept the spare ones under your desk. Because that's what you got to do. Because, you know, it takes so long to get approvals. And so it's stuff like that you're like, you know what, I don't want to work at a company like that. But I don't have a choice because we just got acquired. The other thing is that everybody believes that if you work at a tech startup, you'll have all these options. And if you get in early and your company gets acquired for a lot of money, then you're going to cash in all these options and you're going to be rich. But the reality is that almost never happens. So even if you get acquired for a lot of money, there might be a couple people at your company get rich. Like maybe the founder gets rich, and even the founder doesn't always get rich, but sometimes the founder will get rich. But a lot of times, because of the way share preferences work and the way the actual acquisition gets done and the way if it's a publicly traded company, there'll be lockup and all these other rules. And so, you know, I've had ones where I got acquired and the day that the acquisition happened, I basically pulled out my calculator and did the math on my options. And I was like, whoo, I'm spending the rest of my life on a beach. But then when the actual thing played out and all the pref things were applied and then I was stuck in lockup and the stock was going down while I was waiting to be able to sell mine even though I was vested, you know, at the end I made some money, but it was a tiny fraction of that number on my calculator. Like a tiny fraction, like less than the 10th. And so anyway, so acquisitions are not always good. Some of them I wish that we had just stuck it out and become a big company ourselves.
Yeah. Well, if you're 150 people, already sounds like not a small company anymore.
Yeah, well, we were getting there, but I don't know. You can never predict the future, right? Like some of these companies, if we didn't get acquired, maybe we would have gone out of business. Who knows? In some cases, I think that would have happened, that, you know, we couldn't scale forever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just, they're not always, you don't have much control over it. When it happens, but you're not always happy when it does.
So now that you're an independent consultant, is that also the feeling of freedom that is making it worthwhile?
Yeah. So, you know, I never wanted to do consulting early in my career. That kind of wasn't a goal. Like I like being hands-on and stuff. I like being part of a team. I like the whole vibe of a startup. There's a whole bunch of us and we're working really hard at doing a thing that we think is really important. And you don't get all that stuff in the same way when you're a consultant. But at the same time, I do feel like I had reached a point in my career where, one, I wanted to do something different. Like I had kind of done the same job over and over 7 times. And so, you know, maybe you want to do something different. And and I also got to this point where I felt like I wanted to have a bit more control over my time, over my kind of destiny. I also felt like, you know, you get to a point where you're really, really senior and you're really good at the thing that you do. And there's pieces of it that you're amazing at. And what I love about consulting, or at least the consulting I'm doing, is I get to peel off this one little piece that and it's going to sound arrogant and exaggerated or whatever, but I'm literally the best person on the planet. Like, if you are a B2B tech company of a certain size, there is nobody that knows this positioning thing on the planet better than me. And I can say that with great confidence. There's nobody that's done as many repositionings as me. There's nobody that understands this thing to the depth that I do. And so there's this great satisfaction in being able to carefully choose your clients, and then to also know that there is nobody better to help them. And I feel very confident when I take someone on as a client that we're going to do some good stuff together. And so it's not only great work and fun work, it's also really satisfying. Like, you get to focus on this thing that you're just a rock star at, and then be really choosy about your clients and just do your rock star thing. And so this stage of my career feels a little bit like a gift. Like, it feels a little bit like the thing that I am privileged to be able to do. And I had to do the 30 years before that to get to the point where I could do this really well. But now that I'm doing this, I think this is a very good use of my time, and I would like to do this for the rest of my working life.
I fully understand what you're saying. And I also think that you did the same thing 7 times, and you've got so much knowledge in that time. Like I said, you are the best in your universe, and I think that it is a much better spend time from you from there on to be a consultant, because then you can help a lot more companies than if every time you start with a new company.
Yeah, like that's exactly it, right? And again, it's different work. There's pluses and minuses to it. And like, I would say the biggest drawback is that there's 2 things I really miss. One thing, I miss being part of a team, and I miss that feeling of, we're all on a team and we're working on this thing. And it's, there's this great thing in startups about the mission, and we're all doing this thing, and it's really hard, and there's this great team thing that happens when you're part of a team like that, or at least the good ones. So I miss that a little bit, and I try to make up for that with, I work out of a co-working space most days, and I gotta go find community in other ways, because I don't get that at work the way I used to. And then the second thing that bugs me, and I'm trying to figure out how to handle it in my own consulting business, which is one of my thinking points for 2020, is I would like to be more involved in the follow through, because the thing about positioning is it's very hard to get unstuck on the positioning piece. But once you get unstuck, there's some magic that happens that everything downstream looks a lot easier. But it's not, when I say easier, it is not easy. And so I do miss the, being part of the execution piece, where it's like, okay, now we've got it unstuck. Now we got the thing. Now we're going to go run with it. And so some companies, if they're bigger and they can afford it, or if they're really light on marketing talent inside the company, we figure out a way to work together longer term, and so that I can be more involved in the actual execution of the positioning downstream. A lot of startups don't need that help because they've got the right people on the team. And, and the big thing I've helped them do is get unstuck and get the team in alignment, but they've got the right skills on the team to go run with it, and they literally don't need me. But there's some that I think there's an opportunity for me to be more involved downstream. And I'm doing some thinking about what that might look like. But I don't know what that is yet. But I miss that a little bit. Like, I find myself kind of checking in on my clients and saying, hey, what's going on? I'm so curious. How's it working out? What's happening down there? And we end up having these big, long calls afterwards. But it's kind of not part of my regular offering to have that. But I'd like to figure out a way to do it, but I haven't quite figured it out.
You could change that easily. Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of solutions that you could use. So maybe we talk afterwards. Let's dive a little bit into this positioning, because first you need to read the book, because then you learn a lot about positioning. But let's get some of the points that I thought were very interesting, and I'm maybe have some questions about. Yeah, you said in the beginning of the book, you say current customers love you, but new customers can't figure out what you're selling.
Yeah.
And that is an important indicator that something is wrong with your positioning.
Yeah, that's the most common symptom is if you don't have customers that love you, then maybe you got a product problem, right? But if you've got customers that love you and, they recommend you to people and they keep coming back to you over and over again. And then I think you've got validation on your offering. But sometimes what you'll have is the people that use you now, they love you and it's great. But the new prospects coming in are a bit like, you give them the pitch and they're like, so pitch it to me again? And they just kind of don't get it. And I think that is the most common symptom of positioning, that there's something in the way you're talking about this that does not make the awesomeness of it obvious, right? So either there's something in the way you're positioning it that leads the customer to compare you to other offerings that are not your competition, and therefore they're making the wrong comparison, therefore their assumptions about you are wrong, therefore there's this confusion, or the value you offer is not clear, or it is clear but they just don't understand why it's valuable. All of these things are symptoms that your positioning is not so great, because once they do figure it out and use it, they love you. So there's something happening in the way you're communicating it early in the funnel that is getting people confused.
When you get into a pitch with somebody, you just talked about that you are in a pitch and people don't react the way that you expected because they don't love the product the customers do. I think that's the easy part, when you really see the reaction of the potential client when you're meeting with them. But there is a part before that, when people meet you online or virtually or in a brochure or whatever, and you have no clue that they don't understand you. How do you find that part?
Well, this is the thing. You actually, so the foundation of good positioning is you need to understand how your happy customers think about you. And so, and the best way to do that is to interview them. So you need to get your happy customers, and you need to work out how you manage to get those happy customers and how do they think, and then use that as the foundation for the messaging you're going to build for your website and your brochure and everything else. So in my process, we start with looking at your happiest customers and then thinking about, if they didn't use you, what would they use? And that's kind of the starting point, is this idea of a competitive comparable. And so if they didn't use you, what would they use? And then you say, okay, if this is the comparable, the next step is, what do I got that the alternative does not have? And usually this is a lot of stuff. It ends up with, you have a lot of capabilities that the alternative solutions don't have. And so you can end up making a giant list of these things. But the next step is to then map those capabilities to value. So why do I care about these features, or why do I care about these capabilities? I care because I get this kind of value. And in this step in the process, you're essentially working through the value themes for your offering.
Yes. So that part was difficult for me, because you talk about mapping and about like grouping them together.
Yes.
I have one more question to go back, because you say talk with your happy customers. How many customers do you want to talk to? How many clients do you want to speak?
It's a good question. So in my experience, you need to talk to enough of them so that you start feeling like you're hearing the same thing over and over, and you can recognize the patterns. So sometimes, and that's usually, for me, after I've had 5 conversations, 10 conversations, I'll start seeing the same things over and over. And in those conversations, world that made you all of a sudden want to go out looking for a solution to this. And then once you did decide you were looking for a solution, what else did you look at? You looked at me, but what else did you look at? And then you chose my stuff. So why did you pick me over everything else you could do? And so you need to have enough of those conversations so that you start hearing the same stuff over and over again. So when I've done this, when I was a VP marketing inside B2B tech companies, like sometimes 10 conversations would be enough. And sometimes 5 conversations would be enough, because it was like, I'm hearing the exact same thing over and over again. Sometimes you'll do it in your first 4 or 5 conversations. You'll be like, I don't know, man, these are all sounding kind of different. I'm not sure I see the pattern here. So then you got to do an extra 5 before you see it. But it's a little hit and miss. What you're looking for is patterns. Like what you're looking for is at the end, you're like, okay, I get it. I get how these people think. I get what they're doing now to solve the problem. I get what the comparisons are. I get why they pick me. Now I can go through the rest of this exercise and figure out what makes me different, what makes me better, what's the value, who am I going after, and then I can write messaging from that.
Right. Okay, back to the value part, because I understand that it's important to translate your features, your capabilities to what it means for the client. What's the value of that to the client? But yeah. I'm confused with the mapping part.
Yeah. So, and it's maybe something that's easier to think about if you're thinking about an actual product rather than a service. Mm-hmm. But like, say for example, I've got a tech product, and what it does is invoicing. And it's invoicing for a certain kind of, like, let's say it's invoicing for dry cleaner. Mm-hmm. So that's my product. And so my comparable is, you're just going to do that in Word and send out Word documents. So then I would list this big bunch of features. And one feature is, well, I can save a client profile so that the next time I don't have to retype that in. That's one feature. You don't have that in Word. 2, I can set something up to automatically re-invoice my clients. I don't have that in Word. I can say I can automatically add tax and calculate the tax. I can, and then there's a bunch of things where I can see if the person has received my invoice, and then if the person pays, I get notified that they're paid. So I got a whole bunch of lists like that. So then I go through the list and I say, so what for each of those things, right? So, okay, I can save a profile. So what? Why do I care about saving a profile? Well, it saves me time and I make less errors. And so, then the next thing on my list is, I can automatically calculate the tax. Well, that's the same thing. It saves me time and I can make less errors. I'm starting to see a theme here. Right? And then I've got other features that are not so much about saving time and reducing errors, but they're more about making sure I get paid. So tracking payments. So I might have one value theme that says save time and whatever, and another one that says, get paid faster and don't miss a payment. And it's all about making more money. Yeah. And those would be my value themes. And so when I build messaging out of this stuff, I can say, look, here's what I am. I'm invoicing for dry cleaners. And here's what I do. 1, I make sure you get paid. And here's the 3-4 ways I do that, right? And you can see when they've sent the thing out. They can see when they've made a payment. You can send them reminders to make a payment, all that stuff. Number 2 value thing I do, I save you a lot of time, and you'll make fewer errors. And how do we do that? Well, I do this by saving the profile. I do this by whatever. And then I list my features. The critical thing is to understand the value themes so that you know how to talk about your features, so that you're not just barfing out a great big list of features and talking about each feature. What you want to do is talk about the value you deliver and the set of features that enable that value. Mm-hmm.
Got it. That now I understand this. So this is great.
That's good. Listen to the book. I'm going to make that clearer.
I think it maybe has to do a little bit with the language.
It's really that's where we get into like marketing land there. And you know what? When I was writing the book, I had to rewrite that a lot of times, because marketing people, we're used to talking about features versus benefit versus value. Yeah. Whereas non-marketing folks, that's a hard leap to make. And in the work I do with companies, this is often the trickiest part of the process. Is we're very used to talking about features. And in technology, even worse than that, is we generally map features to value in our head.
Yeah.
So like for example, when you buy a phone, it'll say it has a 59 megapixel camera. But the value of that is intuitive to you because you know that 59 megapixel camera is better than a 10 megapixel camera because the pictures are sharper and they're better when you zoom and all that stuff. But you do that translation in your head. For most of us in our offerings, we can't rely on the customer to know how it translates into value. We have to explicitly tell them.
Yeah, I think the part that made the click for me was also that you found similar values at different capabilities or features.
Oh, and it's always true. So when I do these exercises, and I've done like dozens of these now, like maybe 100 in the last year and a half. And in every single one, we almost never end up with more than 3 big value buckets. Sometimes we'll end up with some minor ones, but you know what? Your customer can't remember 1,000 things. So usually what you've got is 2 to 3 big value themes, and pretty much all your cool features can fit underneath 2 or 3 value themes.
Yeah, love it. That's great. Okay, then you have 4 or 5. So customer that care and markets that you win.
Yeah. So the last bit is, you deliver this value. And so the next thing is to think about, who cares a lot about that value? So if I go back to my example of, I have invoicing software for dry cleaners. Well, obviously I'm targeting dry cleaners. But here's the thing, like not all dry cleaners care the same. So if you send out 2 invoices a month, then using Word is probably fine. But if you send out 100 invoices a month, then the value of this becomes times 10. Like your whole thing about saving time is a really big deal. And your whole thing about, making sure you get paid, it's a big deal because it's confusing. You're sending thousands of these things a month, let's say. So it's where you start saying, look, this is the value we provide. What is it about a prospect that makes them really, really care a lot about that value? And so it's where you get into more fine-tuning your segmentation. Like you could go sell to any dry cleaner, but you'll sell a lot easier and a lot faster if you just target the ones that really send a lot of invoices. Or, and then another thing, maybe some of them already have an invoicing solution. If they do, then it'd be hard to get them to switch. So let's not bother trying to sell those guys yet. And so it's all of that. It's thinking about how do I tell if a prospect is a really, really good fit and therefore super easy for me to close. That's what that bit is all about. Yeah. And then that's your customers who care. And then the last one is this idea of market category. So, it's the, a lot of offerings could be positioned in completely different markets, but you would think about them differently if they were positioned differently. So for example, there isn't a lot of difference between email and chat. It's a lot the same. But if I tell you my solution is email, then it comes with a bunch of expectations. You expect me to have a calendar. You expect me to have an inbox. You expect me to do spam filtering. If I position it as chat, you don't expect any of those things. You expect completely different things. You expect it to be real time. You expect me to have read receipts. You expect me to automatically import contacts somehow. And so even though a product could be positioned as either one of those things, picking which one is super important because the expectations around features are different. The competitive comparables you're going to invoke are different, and you even end up with different expectations around things like pricing. So on the services side, it's important because it helps to communicate what you do and how a customer can understand it. So like if I look at what I do, I could position myself as a marketing consultant. But so then I'll get compared to other marketing consultants. And is that good for me or bad for me? Like, interestingly, I am a positioning consultant, but you got to understand what positioning is to even know that. A lot of the times when I'm in a first call with a CEO, I talk about how we're really talking about go-to-market strategy or business strategy, because that's what we're really focused on. And if you want a good comparable, it's that. It's not marketing.
Hmm.
In fact, I can't do anything with the marketing team. I need to work with the CEO.
Right. Okay. I ask you just a couple more questions. Let's say that.
I'm just more, I've got like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Let's say you got 3 products. Do you start with one or do you tackle all three? How do you do this?
If you have 3 offerings?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. So when you talk about positioning, you really need to understand how the offerings relate to each other and then how a customer buys. So let's say that you have one main offering that people tend to buy that first. And then the other things are things that you would offer them after after you've already worked with them. You can say, oh yeah, plus we have these other things, and you would do those next, or they're add-on things to your main offering. So in that case, your company positioning needs to be really tightly aligned to that first offering. Because once they're a customer, then you can sell them all kinds of stuff, and you don't have to worry so much about positioning. They already know what you are and what you do.
Right.
If you have a thing where you have 3 distinct offerings and they're targeted, a customer coming in new could pick any one of those 3 things, then you're going to have a story that stitches them together. Otherwise, nobody's going to understand what your company stands for. So you need a higher value offering or a higher value positioning that says, like, look, we are experts in online security, and we do online security for banks, and that's what we're all about. And then underneath that, you'd say, but I have 3 offerings, and one's for, detecting the threat, and another one's for whatever, and another one's for whatever. And then I can position those 3 offerings separately, but there needs to be a company positioning that makes the whole thing make sense together. So when I worked at IBM, if we positioned a product, any product at IBM, we would start with, why do you want to work with IBM? Because in our case, like if you didn't want to work with IBM, then there's no point in me selling you a product. And if you didn't care about the value of IBM, like our products on their own were good, but in a lot of cases, there were better independent offerings. Like the main reason you want to buy from IBM is because we're IBM. And so it's because all our stuff works together. It's because we got amazing support and services. And it's all the stuff that you get from IBM. So we would always start with, hey, we're IBM. And this is why you want to work with us. And then we would say, and then, by the way, we have hardware, software, services. We do an amazing job on software. Let me talk to you about software group. And then today we're going to talk about this database thing. And here's my database thing. And so you would always have to start with company positioning and then get down to product positioning after that.
Right. Okay. Your book, obviously awesome.
Obviously awesome. It's a tongue twister.
Yeah. How do people find you? What's the best way to find you, to learn more about you?
So I have a website. It's aprildunford.com. You could go there. But the book is kind of the easiest way if you want to learn more about this stuff. And it's available on Amazon, and it's pretty cheap, and it's designed to be a fast read. Like, I talked to a lot of CEOs when I was writing this book, and the common thing that I heard was that CEOs don't have time to read. They want to read, but they want to be able to read it on a 2-hour plane ride or a 3-hour plane ride. So I kept chopping the book down until it was small enough that you could finish it on a 3-hour plane ride.
And it really works.
Yeah, we don't have time to read 9,000-page books now. So yeah, so you can find it on Amazon, and then I'm on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm April Dunford on Twitter. It's kind of the only social network that I really participate in.
No, I think the part that you really got right is getting to the core of positioning and laying out the foundation, the steps that you need to follow, because a lot of books that you read, in 1 or 2 chapters, the core is there, and then the rest is all kind of explanation and stories and whatever. But
yeah, I'll tell you, the book business is stupid. That's why. Like, book people, I talk to them and they're like, oh, it's got to be this many words and it's got to be, and I'm like, why?
yeah,
And it's a leftover thing from people buying physical books at the bookstore that the spine needed to be fat enough to put your title on in great big font.
yeah.
That's
No,
literally it. And so people are writing books with all this fluff and extra stuff, and they repeat the same thing over and over again. And I was like, my people have no time for this.
no. And even if you're not a big CEO of a big company, I think it's a really great book to read fast and understand how the importance is of positioning and how you can look again at your product and you learn the basic steps that you need to do to understand to do it yourself.
I'm glad you appreciated that, because that was very thoughtful. Like, I spent a lot of time on that with the book, that I was like, you know what? Some people write books and they don't care if anyone's going to read it or not. Like, I talked to a guy who's a best-selling author and he said, look, April, nobody reads a book. It doesn't matter. And I was like, well, it matters to me, man. I was like, I'm not writing this darn thing. No one's like, I need people to actually read it. So I was like, well, if I'm going to get them to read it, it's got to be pretty succinct. And so that's what I focused on.
I think mission accomplished.
Good. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
April, thank you very much for this conversation and, give people a peek into your world and how you work, and also give some understanding about positioning to get the basics. And last thing that I want to say is just buy the book, because then you really get into the grids of it and all the steps that she's laid out there. I love it, and I will talk about it more as I can. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.
Ja. Dat was het leerzame en gave gesprek met April. Je vindt de namen en links die we noemden in het artikel dat bij deze uitzending hoort. Ga daarvoor naar ernhorning.nl/show226. Wil je vanzelf automatisch de volgende afleveringen van deze podcast op jouw telefoon krijgen, zodat je makkelijk kunt luisteren? Heb je een iPhone, dan is het eenvoudig, want er zit standaard de Apple Podcast app op. Je zoekt met het vergrootglas de Ernhorning Show op en klikt op het plusje om te abonneren. Heb je een Android-telefoon, dan is het ook niet ingewikkeld. Je installeert een app zoals bijvoorbeeld de Player FM app, zoekt daar de Ernhorning Show op en klik op abonneren. En vanaf dat moment krijg je vanzelf de nieuwste aflevering op je telefoon. Dankjewel hiervoor. Heb je vragen, reacties, opmerkingen over deze aflevering met April of de podcast in het algemeen? Stuur dan een e-mail naar podcast@ernhorning.nl. Ik hoor super graag van jou. Wil je weten hoe je meer rust krijgt terwijl je er geen tijd voor hebt? Wil je leren hoe je ruimte vrijmaakt om meer te werken aan je bedrijf in plaats van in je bedrijf? Hoe je het netto resultaat van je bedrijf verhoogt zonder harder te werken? Vraag dan het gratis boek Beter Beslissingen, Beter Bedrijf aan op ernhorning.nl. Dit is mijn nieuwste boek en je krijgt het helemaal gratis. Zeker als je de digitale versie downloadt van mijn site. Wil je het fysieke boek, de papieren versie? Die is ook gratis. Je betaalt dan alleen de verzendkosten. Vraag jouw boek nu aan op ernhorning.nl. En het is geen dik boek, je leest het in 1 avond uit. Dankjewel voor het luisteren en graag tot de volgende.
Dankjewel voor het luisteren naar de Ernhorning Show op ernhorning.nl.